What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Classified Scientific Accounts. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash the notification bell because videos like this one have a habit of disappearing. Today I'm bringing you an account from a former Air Force pilot who was flying an F-22 Raptor during a routine training exercise over Nevada in 2009. What started as a standard combat simulation turned into something that made the Air Force activate containment protocols most people don't even know exist. The official story? Equipment malfunction. The real story? That's why you're here. This one's going to make you look at the sky differently. Let's get into it. After what I saw in the sky that day, I stopped believing we're alone up there. I'm sharing this now because I'm out of the service, out of their reach. And frankly, I don't care about the consequences anymore. Before I start, drop a comment if you've ever heard about shadow phenomena over Nevada military ranges in the late 2000s. I need to know if others saw what I saw. They can delete this video, but they can't delete all of you. This probably won't stay online long. My name doesn't matter, but my credentials do. I was a captain in the United States Air Force, fighter pilot, specialized in fifth-generation aircraft. I flew the F-22 Raptor out of Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. This happened in October 2009, during what was supposed to be a routine advanced training exercise over the Nevada Test and Training Range. The kind of mission we'd done 100 times before. The briefing that morning was standard. 4-ship formation, simulated beyond visual range combat, practice intercepts against aggressor aircraft. Weather was perfect. Clear skies, unlimited visibility, light winds. We were scheduled for a 2-hour block of airspace starting at 0900 hours. Our call signs for the mission were Sabre Flight. I was Sabre 3. Our flight lead was a lieutenant colonel with over 2,000 hours in the Raptor, call sign Hammer. Sabre 2 was a major, call sign Torch. Sabre 4 was a captain like me, call sign Dagger. All of us were experienced. All of us were current and qualified. This wasn't a training mission for rookies. This was advanced tactics for combat-ready pilots. We briefed the mission, checked weather, reviewed emergency procedures, and headed to the flight line. Everything by the book. The F-22 is an incredible machine. 5th-generation stealth fighter, super cruise capable, sensor fusion, the most advanced air superiority platform ever built. When you strap into that cockpit, you feel like you're wearing the jet rather than sitting in it. The systems talk to each other. The avionics are intuitive. You have situational awareness that no other aircraft can match. We took off in sequence, joined up in tactical formation, and headed north into the range airspace. Climbed to 45,000 feet. Spread out to tactical spacing. Run the intercept scenarios. Standard stuff. Radio calls were crisp. Systems were green across the board. I remember thinking it was going to be a textbook training flight. I remember being almost bored. That feeling lasted exactly 23 minutes. We were running the third intercept scenario when I noticed something odd. Not on my radar. Not on my sensors. I saw it with my eyes. I was in a left-hand turn, checking my 6, scanning the sky the way you're trained to do. That's when I looked down through the canopy at the desert floor below, and I saw it. A shadow, massive, geometric, perfectly defined against the tan desert surface. At first, I thought it was terrain, a canyon or a ridgeline creating contrast, but it wasn't. The shape was wrong, too regular, too symmetrical. It was a triangle, equilateral, sharp edges, and it was huge. I'm talking miles across. Just sitting there on the ground, not moving, not fading, just there. I keyed the radio. Sabre 3 has a visual on something strange on the deck. Large geometric shadow. No apparent source. There was a pause. Then Hammer came back. Say again, Sabre 3. I repeated it. Gave the bearing and approximate coordinates. Torch chimed in. I've got it too. Definitely a shadow. triangular, no cloud cover above it. Dagger confirmed visual as well. All four of us were seeing the same thing. Hammer called tower control. Nellis Tower, Saberflight is observing a large shadow on the ground at the following coordinates. Request information on any aircraft or activity in the area. Tower came back almost immediately. Saberflight, we have no traffic in that area. No aircraft on radar. Nothing airborne in that grid. Can you describe what you're seeing? Hammer described it. Tower went silent for a moment. Then they asked us to verify our altitude and position. We did. They said they'd check with range control. We held our position in a wide orbit. All four jets now focused on this shadow below us. It wasn't moving. It wasn't changing shape. It was just there. A perfect triangle on the desert floor with nothing above it to cast it. I checked my jet systems. Everything normal. I looked at the sun angle. Shadow was inconsistent with solar position. This wasn't a trick of light. This was something else. And every pilot in the formation knew it. Hammer made the call. Saberflight, we're going to descend and investigate. Maintain tactical formation. Stay sharp. We broke from our orbit and began a controlled descent. Standard tactical approach. Keep speed up. Maintain spacing. Eyes on the target. As we descended through 40,000 feet, my systems were still reading normal, but at 35,000 feet, things started to change. My compass began drifting. Not spinning wildly, but drifting off, heading in a slow rotation. I tapped the gauge. It kept drifting. Then my GPS display flickered. The coordinates jumped, reset, jumped again. I called it out. Sabre 3 is getting some instrument anomalies. Compass and GPS. Torch responded immediately. Same here. I'm showing fluctuations, Dagger confirmed. Hammer acknowledged and said to continue the descent but stay alert. We kept going. At 30,000 feet, the radio started breaking up. Not completely, just intermittent static, like we were flying through interference, but there was nothing out there. Clear sky. No weather. No other aircraft. I switched my radar to different modes. Ground mapping. Air to air. Nothing. The shadow was still visible below us, sharp and clear, but my sensors weren't picking up anything that could explain it. Then my heads-up display started showing conflicting airspeed and altitude data. Numbers jumping, caution lights flickering. I cross-checked my standby instruments. They were reading normal, but the digital systems were acting like we were flying through some kind of electromagnetic field, and we were still 5 miles away from directly above the shadow. Dagger's voice came over the radio. Tense. Lade, I recommend we abort this approach. Something's not right. I agreed with him. But Hammer said, negative. We need to identify this. Continue descent to 20,000 feet. Stay in formation. So we did, because that's what you do. You follow orders. You trust your lead. You complete the mission. But I'll tell you right now, every instinct I had was screaming at me to climb, to get away from whatever was down there. Because even though I couldn't see it, even though it wasn't on my radar, I could feel it. The jet could feel it. Something massive was in the sky below us. Something that didn't belong there, and we were flying straight toward it. At 25,000 feet, I started losing radio communication entirely. The static was constant now. I could barely hear Hammer's transmissions. Tower control was completely gone, just white noise. I switched frequencies. Same thing. I went to the backup radio. Still nothing but interference. I was essentially flying solo in a 4-ship formation, maintaining position by visual reference only. I could see the other 3 Raptors. I could see their position lights, but I couldn't talk to them. That's not supposed to happen. The F-22 has redundant communication systems specifically designed to prevent this. But something was jamming us. Something powerful. Something close. My HUD was going haywire now. The airspeed indicator was showing 450 knots 1 second, 200 knots the next. Altitude was jumping between 25,000 feet and 18,000 feet. None of it was real. I could feel the jet. I knew our actual speed and altitude by the seat of my pants and the standby gauges, but the digital systems were being overwhelmed by some kind of external interference. I glanced at my sensor displays. Still nothing. No radar returns, no infrared signatures, no electromagnetic emissions. Just a shadow on the ground that shouldn't exist and instruments that were losing their minds. I looked over at Torch's jet. He was rocking his wings, the signal to close up formation. We were all feeling it now. Hammer must have made a decision because suddenly all 4 jets began a climbing left turn. We were aborting. Even without radio, the message was clear. Get out. Get altitude. Get away from whatever this was. I pulled my stick back and added power. The Pratt & Whitney engines responded instantly. The Raptor climbed like it wanted out of there as much as I did. We were passing through 28,000 feet when my FLIR system automatically activated. I hadn't touched it. The jet's threat systems must have detected something and tried to get a thermal image. And that's when I saw it. Not with my eyes, but on the FLIR display. There was something there. The thermal image showed a solid object, huge, triangular, suspended in the air between us and the ground. It wasn't hot. It wasn't cold. It was just there. A void in the thermal spectrum, like a hole in the sky shaped like a perfect triangle. The edges were sharp, geometric, artificial. I stared at the display. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. This thing was the size of 3 aircraft carriers, just hanging in the air, not moving, not radiating heat, not making noise, completely invisible to the naked eye but solid as a mountain on infrared. I looked out my canopy. Nothing. Just empty sky. I looked back at the FLIR, still there. I checked my wingman's positions on the display. Torch and Dagger were climbing with me. Hammer was above us, leading the formation up and away. Then I saw their FLIR systems were active too. They were all seeing it. We were all looking at the same impossible thing on our displays. A massive triangular craft that didn't exist in the visible spectrum but was absolutely real in infrared. My heart was pounding. My breathing was too fast. I forced myself to slow down. Stay calm, fly the jet. But my hands were shaking on the stick. This wasn't training. This wasn't a drill. This was something no one had prepared us for. At 35,000 feet, the radio suddenly cleared, like someone had flipped a switch. Hammer's voice came through crisp and clear. Sabre flight RTB immediately. Do not acknowledge. Follow me. RTB meant return to base. And the fact that he said not to acknowledge meant he didn't want any radio transmissions. We were going silent. I glanced at my FLIR one more time. The object was still there, still motionless, still massive. Then, as I watched, it started to fade from the display, not moving away, just fading, like it was phasing out of our dimension. Within 10 seconds, it was gone. The FLIR showed normal thermal gradients. Empty sky, like it had never been there. We climbed to 40,000 feet and turned southeast toward Nellis. My systems began returning to normal. Compass stabilized. GPS locked on. HUD data corrected itself. Radio was clear. Everything was functioning like nothing had happened. But I knew what I'd seen. We all did. I looked down at the desert one more time. The shadow was gone. Just tan dirt and scrub brush. No triangle. No geometric shape. Nothing. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. But I knew I hadn't. Forward-trained combat pilots don't have the same hallucination at the same time. Something had been there. Something real. The flight back to Nellis took 15 minutes. No one said a word on the radio. We just flew in tight formation, silent, processing what had happened. As we approached the airfield, Tower Control gave us landing clearance with unusual instructions. We were directed to a specific taxiway away from the main ramp, not our normal parking area. I thought that was odd, but I followed the formation. We landed in sequence, touched down smooth, and taxied where they told us. That's when I saw them. 2 F-15 Eagles parked on the taxiway ahead of us. Engines running, armed. They hadn't been part of our mission. They weren't even from our squadron. As we shut down our engines, I saw a ground crew approaching. But they weren't our normal maintenance guys. These were security forces, armed. They positioned themselves around each jet. Then I saw several unmarked SUVs pull up. Men in civilian clothes got out, not military uniforms, just dark suits and sunglasses. They started talking to our crew chiefs. I popped my canopy and started to climb out. A security forces airman was standing at the base of my ladder. He said, "Sir, remain with your aircraft. Do not discuss the flight with anyone. You'll be debriefed shortly." I asked what was going on. He said, "Sir, just follow instructions, please." We sat in our cockpits for 20 minutes, all four of us, just sitting there with security forces standing around us and these civilian guys talking into radios. Finally, they let us climb out, but we were separated immediately. Each pilot was escorted to a different vehicle. I was put in an SUV with two men who didn't introduce themselves. They drove me to a building I'd never been to before. No windows, no signs, just a concrete structure on the far side of the base. They walked me inside, down a hallway, and into a small room with a table and 3 chairs. They told me to sit. Then they left. I sat there alone for 30 minutes before anyone came back. The door opened and 2 men walked in. One was Air Force, a colonel I didn't recognize. No name tag, no unit patch, just rank and wings. The other was civilian, older guy, gray hair, expensive suit. He carried a leather folder and a digital recorder. They sat down across from me. The colonel spoke first. "Captain, what I'm about to tell you is classified. You will not repeat any of this conversation. You will not discuss today's flight with anyone, not your fellow pilots, not your family, not your commander. Do you understand?" I said I understood. He nodded to the civilian. The civilian placed the recorder on the table and pressed record. He started with basic questions: name, rank, service number, flight hours, type rating, all information they already had. Then he asked me to describe the flight from takeoff to landing. Everything. I told them. The intercept training, the shadow on the ground, the descent, the instrument failures, the FLIR contact, the massive triangular object. I was detailed. I was precise. I told him exactly what I saw and exactly what my system showed me. The civilian took notes. The colonel just sat there watching me. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then the civilian asked me a strange question. He asked me if I believed in unidentified aerial phenomena. I didn't know how to answer that. I said I believed what my sensors told me. I believed what I saw on my displays. The civilian nodded. He asked if I thought what I saw was a foreign aircraft. I said no. Nothing we know about can do what that thing did. Appear and disappear. Jam our systems. Remain invisible to the naked eye while showing up on infrared. The civilian made a note. Then he asked if I'd ever seen anything like this before. I said no. He asked if I'd ever heard of other pilots seeing things like this. I said no. He asked if I'd discussed this with my fellow pilots after we landed. I said no. We were separated immediately. The colonel leaned forward. He said, "Captain, what you experienced today was the result of electronic warfare testing, a classified program testing advanced jamming and sensor spoofing technology. Your instruments malfunctioned because they were being targeted by experimental systems. The shadow you saw was an optical effect created by atmospheric refraction combined with stress and altitude. The FLIR contact was a sensor ghost caused by the jamming. There was no object. There was no craft. There was only equipment malfunction and misperception under stress." I stared at him. I said, "Sir, with respect, 4 experienced pilots all saw the same thing on multiple independent systems." He said, 4 pilots experiencing the same equipment failure and the same environmental conditions." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I could see in his eyes that it didn't matter what I said. The story was already written. The explanation was already decided. I was here to be told what happened, not to tell them what I saw. The civilian slid a document across the table. It was a non-disclosure agreement. He said, "Sign this. It acknowledges that you participated in a classified test today. It binds you to secrecy regarding the details of that test. Violation carries criminal penalties under the Espionage Act. Read it carefully." I read it. It was 6 pages of dense legal language that basically said I couldn't talk about what happened or I'd go to federal prison. I signed it. What choice did I have? I was active duty Air Force. These people had authority. They had answers I didn't, or at least they claimed to. The civilian took the document back and placed it in his folder. Then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "Captain, you're a good pilot. You have a promising career ahead of you. Don't ruin it by talking about something you don't understand. Accept the official explanation. Move on. Fly your missions. Serve your country. And forget today ever happened." He stood up. The colonel stood up. They both walked out. And I sat there in that windowless room wondering if I was going crazy. A different airman came in and escorted me back to the squadron building. When I got there, the other pilots were already in the ready room. But we weren't alone. There were more civilians, more officers I didn't know. They separated us again before we could talk. I was sent to the flight surgeon's office for a medical evaluation. They checked my vitals, drew blood, asked me questions about stress and fatigue. I told them I felt fine. They prescribed me 3 days of quarters rest anyway, told me to go home, not to come back to the squadron until I was cleared. I asked about my flight data, my gun camera footage, my system recordings. They said it had all been confiscated for analysis due to the equipment malfunction. I'd get it back eventually. I never did. I drove home in my personal vehicle. It was early afternoon. The sky was clear and blue. I kept looking up, wondering if there were things up there I couldn't see. Things just flying around invisible while we went about our lives completely unaware. When I got to my apartment, I sat on the couch and didn't move for 2 hours. I just stared at the wall, trying to process what had happened, trying to make it make sense. But it didn't make sense. Nothing about it made sense. I'd been flying for 8 years. I'd flown combat missions. I'd been in situations where my life was on the line. But I'd never felt what I felt during that descent. Pure dread. Primal fear. The kind of fear that tells you you're in the presence of something beyond your understanding. Over the next 3 days, I tried to contact the other pilots. Hammer didn't answer his phone. Torch texted me back saying he couldn't talk about the flight. Dagger's number went straight to voicemail. It was like they'd been told to ghost me. Or maybe they'd been moved. Reassigned? I didn't know. On the 4th day, I was cleared to return to duty. When I got back to the squadron, Hammer was gone, transferred. Emergency orders to Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, effective immediately. I asked the operations officer why. He said it was a career opportunity and that I should focus on my own flying. I didn't push it, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Torch was still there, but he wouldn't make eye contact with me. We passed each other in the hallway and he looked right through me, like I didn't exist. I tried to approach him in the briefing room. He stood up and walked out. Dagger was different. He pulled me aside one day and said, "Whatever you think you saw up there, let it go. They're watching us. They're listening. If you want to stay in the Air Force, if you want to keep flying, you forget about it." I asked him what they told him in his debrief. He said, "The same thing they told you. Equipment malfunction. Stress. Nothing real." Then he walked away. That was the last time we ever spoke about it. Life went back to normal, or at least it looked normal. I flew my missions. I did my training. I kept my mouth shut, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Every time I flew, I'd scan the sky looking for shadows, looking for shapes that didn't belong. I never saw anything again, but I knew it was out there, whatever it was. I started researching in my free time, carefully, not on government computers. I used my personal laptop at home. I searched for reports of similar incidents, triangular craft, invisible objects, pilot sightings. There was a lot of noise, UFO enthusiast websites, conspiracy theories, obvious hoaxes. But buried in all that noise, I found some things that made me pause. There were declassified reports from the 1980s and 1990s. Military pilots reporting large triangular craft over military installations, sometimes tracked on radar, sometimes just visual sightings. The official explanations were always the same: misidentification, weather phenomena, experimental aircraft. But the descriptions were too consistent, too detailed. These were trained observers, pilots, radar operators, military personnel with no reason to lie, and they were all describing the same thing: massive triangular objects, silent, slow-moving or stationary, sometimes visible, sometimes not, and always over restricted military airspace. I found a report from a Navy pilot in 2004. He'd been flying off the USS Nimitz during training exercises off the coast of California. He and his wingmen encountered a white object performing maneuvers that defied physics. Sudden acceleration, instant stops, movements with no visible means of propulsion. The encounter was captured on FLIR. The video was leaked years later. When I watched it, I recognized the sensor behavior, the way the object appeared on thermal imaging but not on radar, the way it seemed to react to the presence of the aircraft. It was similar, not the same, but similar. That pilot went public. He did interviews. He told his story, and nothing happened to him, at least not publicly. I wondered why some people could talk and others couldn't. Then I realized the difference. The Navy pilot's encounter was already leaked. The video was already out there. There was no putting that genie back in the bottle. But my encounter? That was still classified, still controlled. No video had leaked. No other witnesses had spoken. It was contained, and they wanted to keep it that way. That's when I understood. This wasn't about whether these things were real. The government already knew they were real. This was about controlling the information, controlling the narrative, deciding who gets to know and who doesn't. I served out my commitment. 4 more years after that incident, I flew missions. I trained new pilots. I did my job, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. Every time I strapped into that cockpit, I remembered what I'd seen. And I remembered that they'd lied to me about it. They told me it was equipment failure. They told me it was stress. But I knew what I'd seen. And I knew they knew too. In 2013, I submitted my separation paperwork. I was getting out. My commander asked me why. I told him I wanted to pursue civilian opportunities. He didn't push it. Maybe he knew. Maybe he'd been briefed on my file. Maybe he was just glad to see me go. On my last day in uniform, I cleaned out my locker in the squadron. I found an old flight roster from October 2009. The 4 names, Sabre Flight. I looked up what happened to everyone. Hammer had retired from the Air Force in 2011, 2 years after the incident. He was living in Montana, off the grid, no social media, no online presence. Torch was still in. He'd made lieutenant colonel. He was stationed at the Pentagon now, probably never flying again, just pushing papers. Dagger had separated in 2010, less than a year after the incident. I found him on LinkedIn. He was working as a civilian contractor. No mention of his Air Force service. No photos in uniform. Just gone. I tried to reach out to Dagger once after I got out. I sent him a message through LinkedIn. Just said I'd like to catch up, talk about old times. He never responded. I tried Hammer too. I found a mailing address through public records. I sent him a letter. It came back marked, "Return to sender." Either he'd moved or he didn't want to be found. I gave up after that. They'd all made their choice. Stay quiet, move on, pretend it never happened. I couldn't blame them. They had families, careers, lives to protect. But I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. Not forever. I got a job with a defense contractor. Nothing classified. Just program management. Boring work. But it paid well and I didn't have to wear a uniform anymore. I got married. Bought a house. Tried to build a normal life. My wife knew I'd been in the Air Force, but I never told her about what I'd seen. I couldn't. The NDA I signed was still in effect. Still binding. Still enforceable. I'd signed away my right to talk about it for the rest of my life, or so they thought. But time changes things. People retire. Administrations change. Secrets get old. And I got tired of carrying it alone. In 2018, the Navy released 3 videos of unidentified aerial phenomena. Official releases. Confirmed authentic by the Pentagon. The videos showed objects doing things that shouldn't be possible. The media covered it for about a week. Then it faded. People moved on. But I didn't, because those videos proved what I'd always known. This was real. It had always been real. And the military had been tracking it for decades. If the Navy could release those videos, if those pilots could talk publicly, then maybe my story wasn't as locked down as I thought. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe enough had already been revealed that one more account wouldn't matter. Or maybe I just didn't care anymore. I started writing things down, not for publication, just for myself, to process it, to make sense of it. I wrote everything I remembered, every detail, the shadow, the instruments, the FLIR image, the debriefing, the threats, the disappearances. I kept it in a folder on an encrypted drive. I told myself I'd never share it, but I also told myself that if something happened to me, someone would find it, someone would know, and that was enough. Or at least it was for a while, but it's not anymore. I'm tired of keeping secrets for people who lied to me, people who told me I didn't see what I saw, people who made me feel crazy for believing my own eyes and my own instruments. In 2020, the Pentagon officially established the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. It was a formal acknowledgement that these things were real, that they were being studied, that they posed potential national security concerns. I read the announcement and laughed. I'd known that for 11 years. Every pilot who'd encountered one of these things knew it. But now it was official. Now they were admitting it. Sort of. They still weren't saying what they were. Just that they existed and they didn't know what they were. That was progress, I guess. But it also felt like an insult. All those years of denial. All those pilots who were told to shut up. All those careers affected. And now they were just casually admitting it like it was no big deal. I followed the news closely after that. In 2021, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released a preliminary assessment on UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. That's what they were calling them now. Not UFOs, UAPs. More scientific, less stigmatized. The report acknowledged 144 incidents between 2004 and 2021. Military personnel, credible observers, sensor data. They couldn't explain most of them. The report concluded that some of these objects demonstrated advanced technology, that they posed a safety risk, and that further study was needed. I read the whole thing. It was 9 pages, heavily redacted, mostly vague. But it was something. It was acknowledgement. What the report didn't mention was how many incidents there were before 2004, how many pilots had been silenced, how many reports had been buried, how many people had been threatened into silence. My incident wasn't in that report. October 2009, 4 F-22s, Nevada test and training range. Not mentioned. Not even a redacted reference. Why? Because it was still classified under a different program. A program that predated the UAP task force. A program that had been running for decades. I didn't know its name. I didn't need to. I knew it existed. And I knew my encounter was filed away somewhere in a vault that would never see daylight. I started connecting with other former military personnel online, carefully, through encrypted channels, private forums, people who'd seen things they couldn't explain, people who'd been told to keep quiet. I found a former Navy radar operator who tracked an object off the coast of Virginia in 2015. He described it exactly like what I'd seen. Triangular, massive, appeared on some systems but not others. His ship's captain had ordered all personnel to delete their logs and never speak of it. He'd gotten out of the Navy shortly after. Said he couldn't serve an organization that lied to him about reality. I found an Air Force Security Forces member who'd been stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana. She'd witnessed a triangular craft hovering over the nuclear missile silos in 2012. Silent, motionless. It stayed for 20 minutes, then shot straight up and disappeared. She and 3 other guards saw it. They reported it up the chain of command. They were debriefed by OC, Office of Special Investigations, told it was a classified test, told not to discuss it. One of the other guards tried to file a report with MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, a civilian organization. He was court-martialed for violating security protocols, given a dishonorable discharge. That was the message. Talk and your career ends. Maybe worse. The more people I talked to, the more I realized how widespread this was. It wasn't isolated incidents, it was systematic. These things were showing up regularly over military installations, nuclear facilities, restricted airspace, naval exercises. And every time, the response was the same. Observe, document, classify, deny, intimidate witnesses, move personnel, bury the evidence. It was a coordinated effort across all branches of the military, which meant it was coming from higher up, from somewhere above the individual service branches, from someone who had authority over all of them. I didn't know who, but I knew they'd been doing this for a long time. I tried to file a report with the U.E.P. Task Force in 2021. They'd set up a mechanism for military personnel to submit encounters. I thought maybe now that it was official, I could tell my story. I filled out the form, described the incident, included dates and locations, submitted it. I never heard back. No acknowledgement, no follow-up, nothing. I checked the status. It showed as received. That was it. I waited 6 months. Still nothing. I realized they weren't interested in old incidents. Or maybe they already had my incident in their files and didn't want me stirring it up. Either way, I wasn't getting anywhere through official channels. So I started thinking about going public. Really public. Not just encrypted forums and private conversations. I mean mainstream media, news outlets, documentaries. But I had a problem. I'd signed an NDA, a legally binding non-disclosure agreement. If I went public, I could be prosecuted, fined, imprisoned. My pension could be revoked, my benefits stripped. It wasn't a decision to make lightly. I talked to a lawyer, off the record, explained the situation without giving details. He said NDAs related to classified programs were complicated. If I could prove the information was already in the public domain, I might have a case. But it would be expensive. It would be risky. And I'd probably lose. I thought about it for months, weighed the risks, considered the consequences, talked to my wife about it. She was scared of what might happen to me, to us, to our family. She asked me why I needed to do this, why I couldn't just let it go. I told her I'd tried. For 12 years I'd tried. But I couldn't live with it anymore. Couldn't live knowing what I knew and saying nothing. She said she understood. She said she'd support whatever I decided. But I could see the fear in her eyes. And I knew she was right to be afraid, because these people didn't play around. They'd made that clear from the beginning. Then in 2022, something changed. Congress passed legislation requiring the Pentagon to review all classified UAP materials going back to 1945. They established a new office, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARRO. They were tasked with investigating UAP reports and reporting to Congress. For the first time, there was real oversight, real accountability. The Pentagon couldn't just bury this anymore. They had to answer questions, provide briefings, disclose what they knew. It was a crack in the wall, a small one, but it was there, and I realized this might be my chance. If Congress was asking questions, maybe they'd listen to answers. Maybe they'd protect whistleblowers. Maybe I could finally tell my story without ending up in a cell. I reached out to a congressional staffer through a secure channel. Someone I'd found through my network of former military personnel. Someone who was working on UAP disclosure. I didn't give my name at first. Just said I was a former Air Force pilot with first-hand experience. Asked if there were protections for people like me. The staffer said yes. Whistleblower protections had been built into the legislation. If I reported through proper channels, if I followed the process, I'd be protected from retaliation. Theoretically. I asked what that meant. Theoretically. Staffer said it meant the law was on my side, but enforcement was complicated. People could still make my life difficult in ways that weren't technically retaliation. I thought about that for a while. Technically protected, but practically vulnerable. It wasn't reassuring, but it was better than nothing. I decided to do it the right way. Follow the process. Report through official channels. If they shut me down, at least I'd know I tried. I contacted the Inspector General's office for the Air Force. Told them I had information relevant to the UAP investigation. They set up a secure call. I told them about the October 2009 incident. Everything. The shadow. The object. The FLIR contact. The debriefing. The NDA. The disappearance of the flight lead. All of it. The investigator listened. Took notes. Asked clarifying questions. Then said they'd look into it and get back to me. 3 months went by. Nothing. I followed up. They said the investigation was ongoing. Couldn't provide details. I followed up again 2 months later. Same response. I realized I was getting the runaround. They weren't investigating. They were stalling. Hoping I'd give up and go away. But I wasn't going away. I filed a formal complaint. Cited the whistleblower protections. Demanded a response. A week later, I got a call from a lawyer representing the Air Force. He told me my complaint had been reviewed. He said the incident I described was part of a classified program that was outside the scope of the UAP investigation. He said I was still bound by my NDA. He said if I continued to pursue this, I could face legal action. That was the moment I realized nothing had changed. The task forces and the offices and the congressional oversight were all window dressing. The real programs were still classified, still protected, still off limits. They'd created a mechanism for disclosure that excluded everything that actually mattered. I could report lights in the sky all day long and they'd file it away and thank me for my service. But the moment I talked about something substantive, something with sensor data and multiple trained observers and a documented response, they shut me down. Because that was real. That was evidence. And they couldn't let evidence get out. I was angry. More angry than I'd been in years. I'd followed their rules. I'd gone through their process. I'd tried to do it the right way. And they'd stonewalled me, threatened me, told me to shut up just like they'd told me 13 years earlier. I thought about going to the media anyway. Consequences be damned. But I also thought about my wife, my life, everything I'd built. Was it worth losing all of that to tell a story most people wouldn't believe anyway? I didn't know. I still don't know. But I do know this. They're counting on people like me to make that calculation, to decide it's not worth the risk, to choose silence. And that's how they win. I've spent the last 2 years wrestling with this. Some days I think I should just let it go. Move on. Live my life. Other days I think about all the other pilots out there carrying the same burden, knowing what they know, scared to speak, isolated, alone. And I think maybe if I speak up, even if nothing comes of it, at least they'll know they're not alone. At least someone tried. At least someone said the truth out loud. Even if the truth gets buried again, at least it was spoken. Maybe that matters. Maybe it doesn't. But I've decided to try one more time. I'm recording this account. I'm going to put it out there. Not through official channels. Not through investigations or task forces or congressional offices. Just straight to the public. Let people hear what happened. Let them decide what they believe. Will I face consequences? Probably. Will they try to shut this down? Definitely. Will anyone care? I don't know. But I'm done asking permission to tell my own story. I'm done letting them control the narrative. I saw what I saw. I know what I know. And if they want to come after me for that, let them come. I'll deal with it. But I won't stay silent anymore. Here's what I want people to understand. What I saw wasn't a weather balloon. It wasn't swamp gas. It wasn't a misidentified aircraft or a sensor glitch. It was a massive structured object that appeared on multiple independent sensor systems. It affected our instruments from miles away. It was invisible to the naked eye but solid on infrared. It was real, and the military knew exactly what it was. Or at least they knew it was something. Something they've been tracking for decades. Something they don't want the public to know about. Why? I don't know. Maybe because they don't understand it. Maybe because they can't control it. Maybe because admitting it exists means admitting we're not at the top of the food chain anymore. Whatever the reason, the cover-up is real. The classification is real. The intimidation is real. I've lived it. I've seen it happen to others. And it's still happening. Right now. Today. Pilots are still seeing these things. Radar operators are still tracking them. Sensor systems are still recording them. And every single time, the same protocol kicks in. Classify. Deny. Silence. It's systematic. It's institutional. And it's been going on for longer than most people realize. This isn't a new phenomenon. It's just that people are finally starting to pay attention. Finally starting to ask questions. Finally starting to demand answers. But demanding answers isn't enough, because the people with the answers aren't talking. They're hiding behind classification, behind national security, behind NDAs and threats and legal action. They've built a wall around this information and they're not letting anyone through. So the only way the truth comes out is if people like me break the rules, violate the NDAs, risk the consequences. Tell the story anyway. Is that fair? No. Should we have to choose between our integrity and our freedom? No. But that's the situation we're in. And someone has to go first. Someone has to take the risk. I guess that's me. I don't know what happens next. Maybe this video gets taken down in an hour. Maybe I get a knock on my door tomorrow. Maybe nothing happens and this just disappears into the noise of the internet. But at least I'll have said it. At least I'll have tried. And maybe somewhere out there, another pilot who saw something they can't explain will see this and know they're not crazy. Know they're not alone. Know that someone else saw it too. And maybe they'll find the courage to speak up. And maybe if enough of us speak up, eventually the truth becomes impossible to hide. That's my hope anyway. That's why I'm doing this. Not for me. For everyone who's been told to keep quiet. For everyone who's carrying this burden, you're not alone. I see you. I believe you. And I'm with you. There's something else I need to tell you. Something I didn't mention earlier because it's harder to talk about. The psychological impact of this experience. It's not just about seeing something you can't explain. It's about being told by your own government that your perception of reality is wrong. That what you saw didn't happen. That your instruments were faulty. That you were stressed. That you misunderstood. It does something to you. It makes you question everything. Your judgment, your senses, your sanity. And that's intentional. That's part of the strategy. Make you doubt yourself. Make you think maybe you were wrong. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe you imagined it. But I didn't imagine it. 3 other pilots saw it too. Our systems recorded it. Our jets reacted to it. It was real. And yet, every official document says it wasn't. Every debrief says it was equipment failure. Every explanation says we were mistaken. How do you reconcile that? How do you live with the knowledge that your own organization, the one you swore to serve, is gaslighting you? Telling you that your direct experience is less valid than their official narrative? It breaks something inside you. A trust, a faith, a belief that the institution will tell you the truth. Once that breaks, it doesn't come back. I struggled with depression after that incident. Not immediately. It took a few months to set in. But eventually it hit me. I'd lost interest in flying, lost my sense of purpose. I'd start every mission questioning whether anything I was doing mattered, whether anything I was being told was true. It affected my performance. I became cautious, hesitant, second-guessing myself constantly. My flight commander noticed. He recommended I see the flight surgeon. I did. They asked me if I was experiencing any specific stressors. I couldn't tell them the truth, so I said it was just burnout. They gave me some time off, suggested I talk to a counselor. I never did. The nightmares started around that time. I dream I was back in the jet, descending toward the shadow. But in the dream, I kept descending, deeper and deeper, past the altitude where we'd turned away. And eventually I'd fly into the shadow itself, into the darkness. And the jet would start to come apart, systems failing, controls freezing, hull cracking, and I'd be falling. Just falling into blackness while the jet disintegrated around me. I'd wake up gasping, heart racing, soaked in sweat. It happened 2 or 3 times a week for over a year. My wife would ask me what I was dreaming about. I'd tell her I couldn't remember. She knew I was lying. The hardest part was the isolation. I couldn't talk to anyone about what I'd seen. My fellow pilots were gone or silent. My commanders would have thought I was crazy. My family wouldn't have understood, so I just carried it alone, day after day, year after year, knowing something that no one else knew, or at least no one else would acknowledge. It's a lonely feeling. You start to feel like you're living in a different reality than everyone else, like you're watching a play where everyone has agreed to pretend certain things aren't real, and you're the only one who can see through the act. I thought about going to therapy, a civilian therapist, someone outside the military, but I was afraid. Afraid they'd think I was delusional. Afraid they'd report me. Afraid it would end up in my medical record and destroy what was left of my career. So I didn't. I just pushed it down. Tried to function. Tried to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't normal. Nothing was normal after that. I was fundamentally changed by that experience. Not just what I saw, but how I was treated afterwards. The lies, the threats, the denial. That's what really damaged me. Not the unknown object in the sky, but the known people on the ground who chose to lie about it. When I got out of the Air Force, I thought it would get better. I thought leaving that environment would help. And in some ways it did. I wasn't surrounded by people enforcing the lie anymore. I wasn't looking over my shoulder wondering who was watching me. But the damage was done. I still had the nightmares. Still had the anxiety. Still had this thing living in my head that I couldn't talk about. And I realized the problem wasn't just the incident. It was the secrecy, the inability to process it, to share it, to get validation from another human being that yes, this happened, yes, it was real, yes, you're not crazy. Without that, you're just stuck with it, forever. That's why I'm telling this story now. Not just to expose what happened, but to free myself from it, to stop carrying it alone, to say it out loud and let it exist in the world instead of just in my head. I don't expect everyone to believe me. I don't expect this to change anything, but I need to say it, for my own sanity, for my own peace, because keeping silent was killing me, slowly, quietly, but definitely. And I decided I'd rather face whatever consequences come from speaking than spend the rest of my life drowning in silence. If you're someone who's experienced something similar, I want you to know it's okay to struggle with it. It's okay to feel isolated. It's okay to feel angry at the people who told you to keep quiet. Your feelings are valid. Your experience is real. And you deserve to be able to talk about it without fear. I know the system makes that nearly impossible. I know the NDAs are binding. I know the threats are real, but I also know that silence is a prison. And at some point, you have to decide whether you want to live in that prison for the rest of your life. I decided I didn't. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm talking. Not because it's safe, but because it's necessary. I've been contacted by a few researchers over the years. People studying UAP encounters. Psychologists interested in the impact on witnesses. I've participated in a few studies anonymously. What I learned is that my experience isn't unique. Lots of military personnel struggle with the same issues after encounters like this. The gaslighting, the isolation, the inability to process the experience. It's a pattern. And that pattern suggests this isn't just about a few isolated incidents. It's about a systematic approach to managing information. An approach that treats witnesses as problems to be contained rather than resources to be supported. And that approach is causing real psychological harm to real people. But here's what gives me hope. More and more people are speaking up. More and more witnesses are coming forward. More and more evidence is leaking out. The wall of secrecy is developing cracks. It's slow. It's frustrating. But it's happening. And every person who speaks up makes it a little easier for the next person. Every story that gets told adds to the weight of evidence. Eventually, that weight becomes impossible to ignore. Eventually, the truth comes out. It always does. The only question is how long it takes. And how many people get hurt in the meantime. I'm hoping by adding my voice to the others, I can speed that process up, even if it's just a little bit. So here's what I believe now. After 14 years of thinking about this, after reading every report I could find, after talking to dozens of other witnesses, after weighing all the possibilities and all the explanations, I believe there is something in our skies that is not ours. Something with technology far beyond what we're capable of. Something that has been here for a long time, decades at minimum, possibly longer. And I believe the United States government knows about it, has known about it, has been tracking it and studying it and trying to understand it, but they haven't told us. They've kept it classified, kept it secret, for reasons I can only guess at. Maybe they kept it secret because they couldn't explain it and didn't want to admit that. Maybe they kept it secret because they were afraid of public panic. Maybe they kept it secret because it gave them a strategic advantage to know about it while other nations didn't. Or maybe they kept it secret because acknowledging it would force us to confront uncomfortable truths about our place in the universe, about whether we're really the apex species we think we are, about whether we're really in control. I don't know which reason is true. Maybe it's all of them. But whatever the reason, the secrecy has been maintained for decades at enormous cost. The cost to witnesses like me who've been forced into silence. The cost to scientific progress that could be made if this data was shared openly. The cost to public trust in government institutions. The cost to our understanding of reality itself. All of that has been sacrificed to maintain the secret. And for what? What have we gained by keeping this hidden? Security? I don't think so. If these objects can appear over our most restricted military installations, if they can jam our most advanced sensors, if they can outperform our best aircraft, then we're not secure anyway. Keeping it secret doesn't make us safer. It just makes us ignorant. I think we're at a turning point. I think the secret is becoming unsustainable. Too many people know. Too much evidence has accumulated. Too many leaks have happened. The old system of classification and denial isn't working anymore. People are asking questions. Congress is asking questions. The media is paying attention. Not enough yet, but more than before. And I think that momentum is going to continue. I think in the next few years, we're going to see more disclosure, more acknowledgement, more truth. Not because the government wants to tell us, but because they won't have a choice anymore. The dam is cracking. And eventually, it's going to break. When that happens, I hope people remember the witnesses who tried to speak up, the pilots and radar operators and military personnel who saw these things and tried to report them, who were silenced and threatened and told they were wrong, who carried that burden for years with no support and no validation. We were telling the truth. We were trying to help. And we were treated like problems instead of assets. That should never happen again. When this finally comes out, when the truth is finally acknowledged, there needs to be accountability, not just for what was seen, but for how witnesses were treated, for the lies and the cover-ups and the intimidation. People deserve better than that. I don't know what these objects are. I don't know where they come from. I don't know what they want. Maybe they're foreign technology. Maybe there's something else, something not from here. I lean toward the latter, but I can't prove it. What I can prove is that they're real, that they're in our skies, that our military has been encountering them regularly, and that the official story we've been told is not the whole truth. There's more, a lot more. And eventually, we're going to find out what that more is. I just hope when we do, we're ready for it, because I don't think it's going to be a comfortable answer. My life now is quiet. I work a normal job. I spend time with my family. I try not to think about it every day, but it's always there. in the back of my mind. That memory of looking at my FLIR display and seeing something that shouldn't exist. That feeling of knowing I was in the presence of something beyond my understanding. That moment when the universe got bigger and stranger and more complex than I'd ever imagined. You don't forget that. It changes you, permanently, and you have to decide how to live with that change. I'm still figuring that out, but I do know this. I'm not ashamed of what I saw. I'm not embarrassed. I'm not crazy. I saw something real, something important, something that matters. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't. Not anymore. Not to protect my career. Not to protect the government. Not to make other people comfortable. This is my truth. This is my experience. And I'm owning it. Whatever happens next, at least I can say I told the truth. At least I can say I didn't stay silent. At least I can say I tried to contribute to the larger understanding of what's really going on in our world. That's all any of us can do. Tell our truth, share our experience, and hope that somewhere, someone is listening. If you've watched this far, thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being open to the possibility that the official story isn't the whole story. Thank you for considering that maybe, just maybe, there's more to reality than we've been told. I don't ask you to believe me blindly. I ask you to consider the evidence. Look at the reports. Listen to the witnesses. Watch the videos. Read the declassified documents. Look at what the Navy has released. Look at what Congress is investigating. Look at the pattern. And ask yourself, does this look like nothing? Does this look like weather balloons and misidentifications? Or does this look like something real that's been hidden for decades? I'm going to end this the way I started, with a question. A question I've been asking myself since October 2009. If they're willing to lie about this, what else are they lying about? What other truths are hidden behind classification stamps and NDAs? What other realities are we living in ignorance of? I don't have those answers. But I think we all deserve to find out. We deserve to know the truth about our world, about our skies, about what's out there. Not the sanitized version, not the politically convenient version, the real version, the whole truth. And the only way that happens is if people keep asking questions, keep demanding answers, keep pushing against the wall of secrecy. So please, keep asking, keep pushing, keep demanding the truth, because it's out there, and eventually it's going to come out, whether they wanted to or not. Thank you for listening to my account. Whatever you choose to believe, I hope you'll at least remember that someone tried to tell you, that someone stood up and said what they saw, even when it was dangerous, even when it was difficult, even when no one wanted to hear it. Someone spoke, and maybe that matters. Maybe it doesn't, but it's done now. It's out there. And I can finally breathe a little easier, because the secret isn't just mine anymore. It's yours now too. What you do with it is up to you. But at least now you know. Someone saw something in the sky over Nevada in 2009. Something massive. Something impossible. Something real. And the government told them to forget about it. But I didn't forget. I never will. And now